Daniel Harper had lived with his college roommate, Chris, for almost 3 years in a small apartment in Seattle. They were close friends, but this weekend, Chris was visiting his parents across the state. For the first time in months, Daniel expected to spend an entire evening completely alone with nothing but silence. Earlier that afternoon, Daniel visited his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, who always greeted everyone with homemade cookies and warm conversations. She had lived alone since her husband passed away several years earlier. Despite her cheerful smile, Daniel often wondered whether the quiet house felt lonely after sunset each evening. As they talked over fresh coffee, Mrs. Carter asked about Chris. Daniel smiled and explained that his roommate had gone out of town until Monday. Trying to sound casual, he laughed softly and said, "My roommate won't be home tonight." He expected nothing more than friendly conversation before heading back home. Instead, Mrs. Carter looked directly into his eyes with genuine kindness. Without hesitation, she replied, "Then I'll be here." Daniel blinked in surprise, unsure whether she was joking. Her gentle smile never faded. There was something comforting about her words that instantly made the quiet evening seem far less empty. Daniel thanked her politely, assuming she simply meant she would be around if he needed anything. He returned to his apartment, cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, and settled onto the couch with a movie. Yet the apartment felt strangely larger than usual, every creaking floorboard reminding him how empty the rooms had become. Around 7 o'clock, someone knocked gently on the apartment door. Daniel opened it to find Mrs. Carter carrying a basket covered with a colorful towel. She smiled warmly and held it forward. Inside were homemade chicken pot pie, fresh bread, and chocolate chip cookies still warm from the oven, filling the hallway with delicious aromas. "I meant what I said," she explained kindly. "No one should spend an evening feeling alone." Daniel invited her inside, touched by her unexpected generosity. They shared dinner at the small kitchen table, laughing about old neighborhood stories and comparing childhood memories from completely different generations. Mrs. Carter told him about growing up in a small farming community where neighbors never waited for invitations before helping one another. If someone was sick, grieving, or simply lonely, people showed up with food, conversation, and compassion. "Community," she said softly, "is built through simple acts, repeated with sincere hearts." Daniel listened carefully while realizing how different modern life had become. Everyone stayed busy, connected through phones, yet disconnected from the people living only a few steps away. He admitted there were days when he hardly recognized neighbors he passed every morning in the apartment hallway. After dinner, they played an old card game Mrs. Carter had loved since childhood. She laughed every time Daniel misunderstood the rules, teasing him with grandmotherly patience. Hours passed surprisingly fast. The apartment that had felt cold and silent only a short while earlier was now filled with cheerful conversation and genuine warmth. As the evening grew darker, heavy rain suddenly began pouring outside. Thunder echoed across the city while strong winds shook nearby trees. Mrs. Carter glanced toward the window before smiling. "Looks like staying here was a good decision," she joked, making Daniel laugh louder than he had all week. During the storm, the apartment briefly lost electricity. Instead of worrying, Daniel found several candles while Mrs. Carter prepared hot tea using a small camping stove she had thoughtfully brought just in case. Sitting by candlelight, they shared stories that somehow felt even more meaningful surrounded by peaceful darkness. Mrs. Carter eventually spoke about losing her husband after 42 years of marriage. The hardest part, she admitted, was not learning how to live alone. It was accepting help from others. "People often think strength means independence," she said. "Sometimes strength means allowing kindness to reach your heart." Those words stayed with Daniel long after the electricity returned. He realized he had spent years pretending everything was fine, even when stress and loneliness quietly followed him home after difficult workdays. Accepting company, friendship, and support was never weakness. It was simply part of being human. Near midnight, Mrs. Carter gathered her empty basket and prepared to leave. Daniel walked her safely across the hallway to her apartment door. Before saying goodnight, she smiled exactly as she had earlier and reminded him, "Nobody should have to face a lonely night when caring neighbors are close." When Chris returned home 2 days later, he immediately noticed the leftover pie in the refrigerator and the deck of cards still resting on the coffee table. Daniel shared the entire story. Chris smiled warmly before saying, "Sounds like you gained more than a neighbor this weekend. You found family." From that day forward, Daniel and Chris regularly visited Mrs. Carter every Sunday afternoon. They helped with groceries, fixed small things around her apartment, and shared countless meals together. What began with one simple sentence became a lasting friendship, proving that kindness often arrives quietly when someone chooses to simply be there.